Stand against the bathroom wall, you stinking mechanic!" My daughter-in-law screamed at me during my son's wedding. I smiled, decided to cancel my gift, and walked away. When they found out my gift was a check for, the leech wouldn't stop calling me. "I'm glad to have you here. Welcome to Minister of Revenge. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I've been to a lot of weddings in my 65 years, but I never thought I'd be treated like garbage at my own son's. The invitation said 4 Ogwesh at the Riverside Country Club, the kind of place where I'd never set foot if it weren't for Owen marrying into money. I wore my best suit, the navy one Eleanor had picked out for me 3 years before she passed. It still smelled faintly of her perfume when I pulled it from the closet that morning. The parking lot was full of luxury cars that cost more than most people make in a year. I parked my old Ford pickup between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling like a weed in a rose garden. But this was my son's wedding day, and I wasn't going to let anyone's money intimidate me. I'd worked my hands raw for 40 years as a mechanic, built my business from nothing, and I had every right to be there. The country club buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Women in designer dresses floated past like colorful butterflies, their jewelry catching the afternoon lights streaming through tall windows. Men in expensive suits talked loudly about stock portfolios and golf handicaps. I recognized a few faces from previous family gatherings, but most were strangers from Skylar's world. I spotted Owen near the altar, adjusting his bow tie nervously. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, though thinner than when I'd last seen him 6 months ago. Skylar had been keeping him on some fancy diet, something about toxins and cleanses that I never understood. When our eyes met across the room, he gave me a quick wave, but didn't come over. I understood. Groom nerves. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I'll give them that. Skylar looked stunning in her white gown that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She glided down the aisle like she was born to be the center of attention, which maybe she was. Her father, some big-shot lawyer, walked her down with his chest puffed out like he was giving away a princess. I clapped when they kissed, same as everyone else. Owen was happy, and that's what mattered. At least that's what I told myself as I watched my son transform into someone I barely recognized, surrounded by people who wouldn't give me the time of day. The reception started immediately after, and that's when things went south. I made my way through the crowd looking for my assigned seat. The tables were marked with elegant cards, and I searched through table 1, table 2, working my way through the numbers. I found myself at table 12, stuck in the back corner near the kitchen doors, with some distant relatives I'd met maybe twice. That should have been my first clue. I was making small talk with Owen's great-aunt when I decided to use the restroom. The bathrooms were down a marble hallway, lined with oil paintings of dead rich people. As I walked back toward the reception, I heard my name being discussed in hushed but angry tones around the corner. "Where did you put Frank?" It was Skylar's voice, sharp with irritation. "Table 12, like you asked," replied someone I didn't recognize. Probably the wedding planner. "Good. Keep him there and make sure the photographer knows not to include him in any of the family shots. This is a classy event." My feet felt like they were glued to the marble floor. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering in my chest. "What if Owen asks where his father is during pictures?" the planner asked. "Owen won't ask. He knows better by now." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My own son had agreed to erase me from his wedding photos. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, trying to process what I'd heard. Then I heard footsteps and managed to duck into an alcove before Skylar rounded the corner with two women I didn't recognize. I made it back to table 12 somehow, though I don't remember the walk. The great-aunt was still talking about her cats or her garden. I couldn't focus. Everything felt muffled like I was underwater. I picked at the expensive food on my plate, some kind of fish with a sauce I couldn't pronounce, while watching my son laugh and dance with his new wife. The speeches started after dinner. Owen's best man told funny stories about college. Skylar's maid of honor gushed about their friendship since childhood. Then Owen stood up to thank everyone for coming. "I want to thank my beautiful wife for making me the luckiest man alive," he began, his voice carrying across the silent room. "And I want to thank the Ashiford family for welcoming me with open arms." He went on to thank Skylar's parents, her grandparents, even her college roommate who'd helped plan the bachelor party. He thanked the wedding planner, the caterer, the band. But as the speech went on and on, one name never came up. Mine. I sat there listening to my son thank everyone except the man who'd raised him alone after his mother died, who'd worked double shifts to pay for his college, who'd taught him to drive and throw a baseball and be a decent human being. Or, so I thought. The applause was thunderous when Owen finished. People were wiping tears from their eyes, calling it the most beautiful speech they'd ever heard. I clapped too, because what else could I do? Make a scene at my son's wedding. After the speeches, people started mingling again. I was considering making my excuses and heading home when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to find Skylar standing behind me, her smile as fake as her eyelashes. "Frank," she said in that saccharine voice she used when other people were listening. "Having a good time?" "It's a beautiful wedding," I managed to say. "Oh, I'm so glad you think so. We put so much work into making it perfect." She glanced around dramatically, then leaned closer. "Actually, I need to ask you a tiny favor. Here it comes. I thought the photographer wants to get some shots of the family by the fountain outside, and honestly, the lighting is just perfect right now, but we're having some issues with spacing and composition." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it was the kind of whisper meant to be overheard. "Would you mind terribly standing by the bathroom wall over there just for a few minutes while we get the important shots?" The words hung in the air like a slap around us. Conversations had quieted. People were listening, waiting to see how I'd react. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. "Stay by the bathroom wall, you filthy mechanic." The whisper disappeared entirely, replaced by a voice loud enough for half the receptionist to hear. "This is a classy event, not some trailer park barbecue." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 people stared at me, waiting for my response. Some looked shocked, others seemed amused by the entertainment. A few were already pulling out their phones. I looked at Skylar's face, twisted with contempt and satisfaction. This wasn't about photographs, or lighting, or spacing. This was about putting me in my place, making sure everyone knew where I stood in this new family hierarchy. I glanced around the room and found Owen. He was standing near the head table, frozen with his mouth slightly open. Our eyes met across the crowded reception hall, and for a moment, I thought he might say something. I thought he might defend his father. Instead, he looked away. That's when I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd been wearing all day, but a real one. Because suddenly, everything became crystal clear. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the thick envelope I'd been carrying all day. The envelope containing my wedding gift to the happy couple. "You know what, Skylar?" I said, my voice calm and steady. "You're absolutely right. I don't belong here." I tucked the envelope back into my pocket and looked around the room one more time. All these people in their expensive clothes, looking down on the man who'd built something from nothing with his bare hands. Let them have their fancy party. I walked toward the exit, my head held high. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of confused conversations starting up again. Someone called my name, but I didn't turn around. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took my first deep breath in hours. I got into my old pickup truck and drove home, leaving behind a room full of people who'd never understand that sometimes walking away with your dignity is worth more than all the money in the world. But they were about to learn exactly how much money we were talking about. I sat in my kitchen the next morning, nursing my second cup of coffee and staring at the envelope on my table. It looked so innocent lying there, between the salt shaker and Eleanor's old recipe box. Just a cream-colored envelope with Owen and Skylar written in my careful handwriting. But inside that envelope was a check for $500,000, half of everything I'd saved and built over 40 years of working. Half of what I'd planned to leave Owen when I died, given early, so I could see him enjoy it. The other half was meant to stay in investments for his future, for grandchildren I'd probably never meet now, for a legacy that apparently meant nothing to the people it was intended for. My phone had been ringing since 7 in the morning. The caller ID showed Owen's number, but I let it go to voicemail every time. Then Skylar's number started calling. I ignored those too. I wasn't ready to talk to either of them yet. I needed time to process what had happened, to figure out what came next. The truth was, I'd been planning this gift for 2 years. When Owen announced his engagement to Skylar, I decided it was time to liquidate some of my assets. The 3 auto repair shops I'd built weren't making me rich, but they'd been profitable enough that I could sell them to a chain for a decent price. Combined with Eleanor's life insurance and what we'd managed to save over the years, it was more money than a mechanic from the wrong side of town had any right to have. I'd wanted to surprise them, maybe help them buy a house, start their married life without debt, maybe show Skylar's family that Frank the mechanic wasn't just some greasy-handed nobody who didn't belong at their fancy parties. How stupid that seemed now. By noon, the calls had become constant. My voicemail box was full. I finally decided to listen to a few messages just to see how desperate they were getting. "Dad, it's Owen. Please call me back. There was a misunderstanding yesterday. Skylar feels terrible. She was just stressed about the wedding. You know how brides get. Please, Dad, call me." The next message was different, Skylar's voice, but trying to sound sweet and apologetic. "Frank, hi, it's Skylar. I am so sorry about yesterday. I was completely out of line. Wedding planning is just so stressful, and I took it out on you. That was wrong of me. Owen is really upset with me, and I don't blame him. Could we maybe meet for lunch this week? I'd love to make it up to you." I almost laughed. She'd gone from calling me a filthy mechanic to wanting to take me to lunch in less than 24 hours. I wondered what had changed her mind so quickly. The third message answered that question. "Dad, it's Owen again. Look, Skylar mentioned you had an envelope yesterday, a wedding gift. We never got it, and we're trying to make sure all the gifts are accounted for. The wedding planner is helping us track everything down. If you still have it, maybe we could pick it up this evening. We're already in the neighborhood." There it was. They weren't calling because they felt bad about humiliating me. They were calling because they realized I'd walked away with whatever gift I'd brought, and they wanted to know what they were missing. I deleted all the messages without listening to the rest. That evening, just as the sun was starting to set, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see Owen's BMW parked behind my truck. He got out alone, no Skylar in sight, and walked up to my front porch like he was approaching a stranger's house. I opened the door before he could knock. "Hi, Dad." He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his car keys. "Can I come in?" "Sure." I stepped aside and let him enter the house where he'd grown up, where I'd bandaged his scraped knees and helped him with homework and taught him how to shave. He looked around like he was seeing the place for the first time. Eleanor's pictures still covered the mantelpiece. The same furniture we'd bought when he was in high school filled the living room. Everything exactly as it had been when he'd moved out 5 years ago to start his life with Skylar. "Dad, about yesterday." "You want some coffee?" I interrupted, not ready for whatever speech he'd prepared. "No thanks, I can't stay long. Skylar's waiting in the car at the corner. She didn't think you'd want to see her right now. Smart girl. At least she had that much sense." Owen sat down on the edge of Eleanor's favorite chair, the blue recliner where she used to read her romance novels. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the expensive clothes and fancy lifestyle were weighing him down instead of building him up. "She feels terrible about what happened," he said, the words coming out rehearsed. "She's been crying all day. The stress of the wedding just got to her, and she lashed out at the wrong person. You know, she didn't mean it." I sat down across from him on the couch, studying my son's face, looking for some sign of the boy I'd raised, the one who used to defend smaller kids from bullies at school. The one who'd cried when we had to put down our old dog Rex because he couldn't stand to see anything suffer. "Did she tell you what to say to me, Owen?" "What?" "No, Dad. I'm saying this because I want to. Because I know you're hurt." "Am I hurt?" He blinked, thrown off by the question. "Well, yeah, of course you are. Anyone would be after what happened, and what exactly happened. Dad, you don't have to make this harder than it needs to be. We both know Skylar was out of line. She knows it too. But you walking out like that in front of all her family and friends, it made things worse. There it was. Somehow, this had become my fault, too. I embarrassed her by leaving after she called me a filthy mechanic in front of 200 people. Owen rubbed his forehead, a gesture I recognized from when he was a teenager, trying to get out of trouble. "Look, I know it sounded bad, but you have to understand she comes from a different world. Sometimes she says things without thinking. She grew up around people who measure success differently than we do. You know what I mean? No, Owen, I don't. Explain it to me. He sighed, clearly frustrated that I wasn't making this easy for him. Her family has money, Dad. Old money. They're used to a certain way of life, certain standards. It doesn't mean they're better than us, but they have expectations, and I don't meet those expectations. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Another silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the street, probably riding bikes or playing catch like Owen and I used to do in the same neighborhood 20 years ago. The envelope, Dad, Owen finally said, giving up on the apology speech. Skylar said you had a wedding gift yesterday. We didn't see it on the gift table. No, you wouldn't have, so you still have it. I reached into the kitchen and picked up the envelope from the table. Owen's eyes followed it like a dog watching a bone. It held up the envelope. Yeah, can I? He gestured toward it. I sat back down, still holding the envelope. Guess what's inside, Owen? Dad, I don't want to play games. Humor me! What do you think your old man, the filthy mechanic, could afford to give you as a wedding present? Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. I don't know. Maybe a couple hundred, a savings bond, 500,000. The words hung in the air like smoke. Owen stared at me, mouth slightly open, like I just told him I was an alien from Mars. What? $500,000? That's what was in this envelope when I walked out of your wedding yesterday. His face went through several changes. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked like panic. Dad, are you serious? Completely serious? Want to see? I opened the envelope and showed him the check. His eyes widened as he read the amount, then read it again. How do you have this kind of money? 40 years of work, Owen. 40 years of saving every penny I could, investing wisely, building something for my family. The repair shop sold for more than you'd expect. Your mother's life insurance. Compound interest is a beautiful thing when you start young, and stay disciplined. He was still staring at the check like it might disappear if he looked away. You were going to give us $500,000. Was going to? Yes. What do you mean, was going to? I put the check back in the envelope and set it on the coffee table between us. Owen, let me ask you something. Yesterday, when your wife called me a filthy mechanic in front of all those people, what did you do? Dad, what did you do when she told me to stand by the bathroom wall because I didn't belong with the important people? He looked down at his hands. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. You didn't know what to say when someone humiliated your father at your own wedding. It happened so fast. It wasn't fast, son. There was plenty of time for you to say something, to stand up for the man who raised you. But you didn't. You looked away. The silence that followed was deafening. Owen sat there staring at his expensive shoes, probably trying to figure out how to fix this without actually admitting he'd done anything wrong. So, what happens now? He finally asked. Now, you go home to your wife and tell her that her little tantrum yesterday cost you both $500,000. Dad, come on. Don't do this because you're angry. Don't punish me for her mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone, Owen. I'm just not rewarding them either. His phone started buzzing. He glanced at it, and I could see Skylar's name on the screen. She's wondering what's taking so long, he said. Then you better go. He stood up slowly, looking at the envelope on the table like it was a snake that might strike at any moment. This doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. He said, maybe we could all sit down together, work this out like adults. Maybe, I said, knowing we wouldn't. After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, holding that envelope and thinking about the future I'd imagined for my son. A future where he'd be grateful for the sacrifices I'd made, where he'd understand the value of hard work and respect. A future where his wife might not love me, but would at least treat me with basic human decency. That future had died yesterday at the Riverside Country Club. But as I sat there in Eleanor's chair, I realized something else had died, too, my need for their approval. For the first time in years, I felt free. My phone started ringing again. This time, I didn't even look to see who it was. 3 days passed in blessed silence. No phone calls, no unexpected visits, no desperate voicemails. I started to think maybe Owen had finally gotten the message. Maybe he'd decided that $500,000 wasn't worth swallowing his pride and admitting his wife was wrong. I should have known better. On Thursday morning, I was in my garage organizing my tools when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, I could see Owen's BMW again. But this time, Skylar got out too. She was wearing a simple sundress instead of her usual designer outfits, and her makeup looked deliberately understated. The performance was already beginning. I stayed in the garage, pretending to be absorbed in sorting through my socket wrenches. Maybe if I ignored them, they'd go away. "Dad," Owen's voice called from the driveway. "We know you're in there. We just want to talk." I heard footsteps approaching. Then Skylar's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Frank, please, I need to apologize properly." Against my better judgment, I walked out to meet them. Skylar's eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked genuinely distressed. If I didn't know better, I might have felt sorry for her. "I've been sick about what happened at the wedding," she began before I could say anything. "I haven't slept in 3 days. I keep replaying it in my head, wishing I could take it back." She took a step closer, and I noticed her hands were shaking. I don't know what came over me. The stress, the pressure from my family, the photographers constantly telling us what to do. None of that is an excuse. But I want you to understand that it wasn't really me talking. That's not who I am. Owen stood behind her, nodding along like a bobblehead doll. "We both know that's not who you are, Skylar," I said quietly. "Exactly," she said, relief flooding her face. "You understand. That's why this has been eating me alive. Because you know I'm not some spoiled brat who looks down on people. You know I respect you." I let her continue. "I was thinking, maybe we could start over, have a proper family dinner, just the 3 of us. I could cook for you. I've been taking cooking classes, and I'd love to show you what I've learned. That's thoughtful of you. And maybe you could tell me more about Owen when he was growing up. I feel like I don't know enough about his childhood, about the man who raised him to be such a wonderful person." The flattery was laid on thick, but she was good at it. I could see why Owen had fallen for her charm. "I'd like that," I said, and watched her face light up. We made plans for dinner the following Sunday. Skylar insisted on cooking everything herself. No catering, no help from her usual staff, just a simple family meal to bridge the gap between us. After they left, I sat in my kitchen and laughed. Did they really think it would be that easy? Sunday arrived, and I showed up at their house right on time. They'd bought a place in Willowbrook Estates, the kind of neighborhood where the houses all looked like they'd been designed by committee, and the lawns were maintained by professional crews. Their house was a colonial with white columns and a circular driveway, the kind of place I'd driven past my whole life without ever imagining I'd be invited inside. Skylar answered the door wearing an apron that looked like it had never been used. "Frank, you're right on time. I hope you're hungry." The dining room table was set with what looked like their wedding china. Candles flickered in silver holders, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Everything was perfect, just like at the country club. During dinner, Skylar was the picture of the devoted daughter-in-law. She hung on every word I said, laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions about my work and my life with Eleanor. She even teared up when I mentioned how much I missed my wife. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman," Skylar said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I wish I could have known her better. She would have loved you." I lied smoothly. Owen beamed, clearly thrilled that his wife and father were finally getting along. After dinner, Skylar insisted on showing me the photo albums from their honeymoon in Europe. Page after page of Owen and Skylar in front of famous landmarks, eating at expensive restaurants, staying in luxury hotels, the kind of trip that probably cost more than most people make in 6 months. "We took so many pictures," she said, settling beside me on their white leather couch. "But you know what's missing." "What's that?" "Family photos. We hardly have any pictures with you, Frank. That needs to change." She pulled out her phone and started snapping selfies of the three of us. Owen on one side, her on the other, me in the middle, looking like an uncomfortable sandwich filling. "These are perfect," she said, scrolling through the photos. "I'm going to frame some of these for our mantelpiece." The evening continued in the same vein. Skylar was attentive, charming, and apparently sincere in her desire to build a relationship with me. If I hadn't known about the $500,000 check, I might have believed she genuinely had a change of heart. As I was getting ready to leave, she walked me to the door. "Frank, I hope tonight showed you how sorry I am about the wedding. I know I can't undo what I said, but I want you to know that I respect you. I respect what you've built, what you've accomplished. Owen is lucky to have you as a father." "Thank you, Skylar. That means a lot." "I was wondering," she paused, looking suddenly vulnerable. "Do you think there's a chance we could put the wedding behind us? Move forward as a family? I pretended to consider it. I think that's possible." "Really?" "Really. But it's going to take time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." She nodded earnestly. "Of course, I understand completely. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." 2 weeks later, the phone calls started again. But this time, they weren't from Owen or Skylar. "Frank, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter-in-law, Skylar Ashford Peterson." My blood went cold. "What happened?" "She was brought in about an hour ago. There's been a miscarriage. She's asking for you." A miscarriage? I hadn't even known Skylar was pregnant. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my mind racing. When had she gotten pregnant? Why hadn't Owen told me I was going to be a grandfather? I found them in a private room on the 3rd floor. Owen sat beside Skylar's bed, holding her hand and looking devastated. Skylar lay propped up against the pillows, pale and fragile looking. "Frank," she said weakly when she saw me. "You came?" "Of course I came. How are you feeling?" "Empty," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "We lost our baby." Owen looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Dad, we were going to tell you about the pregnancy at Sunday dinner next week. We wanted it to be a surprise." I sat down in the chair on the other side of Skylar's bed, trying to process this information. A grandchild. I'd been about to have a grandchild, and now it was gone. "How far along were you?" I asked gently. 8 weeks, Skylar said. "We just heard the heartbeat last week. Everything seemed fine." And then she broke down, sobbing. I reached over and took her free hand. "I'm so sorry, Skylar. I'm so sorry for both of you." "The doctor said it was probably stress-related," Owen said quietly. "All the tension from the wedding, the family conflict. She's been so worried about fixing things between us." The implication hung in the air like a weight. My anger, my refusal to forgive had somehow contributed to the loss of my grandchild. "Owen, that's not," I started to say. "I'm not blaming you, Dad," he interrupted. "I'm just saying that stress can affect pregnancy, and there's been a lot of stress lately." Skylar squeezed my hand weakly. "I don't want you to feel guilty, Frank. This isn't your fault, but I keep thinking, if we'd all been getting along, if I hadn't said those terrible things at the wedding, maybe things would be different." I sat there holding her hand, watching her cry, feeling the weight of their grief and their subtle accusations. A grandchild I'd never known about was gone, and somehow I was partially responsible. Over the next few days, I found myself calling to check on them, bringing groceries, helping around the house. Skylar was weak and depressed, barely getting out of bed. Owen took time off work to care for her, but he looked exhausted. "She's not handling this well." He confided to me one afternoon while Skylar was napping. "She keeps saying she failed as a wife, that she can't even carry a baby properly. The doctor says this kind of guilt is normal, but it's breaking my heart to see her like this. Maybe she should talk to someone, a counselor." I suggested that, but she says she just needs time and family support. He looked at me meaningfully. "Dad, I know things have been rough between us lately, but she really needs to feel like she belongs in this family, like she's accepted." "She has accepted, Owen. I know you say that, but after everything that's happened, I think she needs to know you've truly forgiven her, that you're not still angry about the wedding." That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the grandchild I'd never meet, a baby who might have had Eleanor's eyes or my stubborn streak, a little person I could have taught to throw a baseball or change a tire. The grief was real, even if everything else wasn't. 3 weeks after the miscarriage, Skylar seemed to be recovering. She was up and around, cooking again, even talking about going back to her volunteer work at the art museum. But there was still a sadness in her eyes, a fragility that made me want to protect her. That's when she made her request. "Frank," she said one evening after dinner, "I've been thinking about something about the baby we lost." Owen reached over and took her hand. "I know this might sound strange, but I feel like that baby was trying to bring us together as a family. Like maybe that was its purpose, even though it couldn't stay." I waited for her to continue. "I want to do something to honor that, something that shows we're united, that we've moved past all the hurt and anger. I was thinking, maybe we could have a small ceremony, Just the three of us. A way to officially welcome me into the Peterson family. Skylar, you're already part of the family, I said. I know, but after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to earn my place to prove that I'm worthy of being Owen's wife and your daughter-in-law. Owen was nodding enthusiastically. I think it's a beautiful idea, Dad. A fresh start for all of us. The ceremony took place in their backyard the following Saturday. Nothing elaborate, just a simple exchange of vows between Skylar and me. She promised to honor and respect me as Owen's father. I promised to welcome her as my daughter and support their marriage. Afterwards, we planted a small oak tree in memory of the baby they'd lost. Skylar cried as we covered the roots with soil, and I found myself tearing up too. Thank you for forgiving me, she whispered, as we stood there in the fading light. For giving me a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance, I said, meaning it. I drove home that evening. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Maybe Skylar really had changed. Maybe the loss of the baby had made her realize what was truly important. Maybe we could be a real family after all. I should have known that peace never lasts. The first crack in the facade came 2 days later, when I stopped by their house unannounced to drop off some tools Owen had asked to borrow. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. Their cars were in the driveway, so I walked around to the backyard where we'd planted the memorial tree. I could hear Skylar's voice through the open kitchen window, talking on the phone. I know, but you should see how pathetic he is now. All that anger just melted away the second he thought I lost a baby. Men are so predictable. I froze by the oak tree, my hand still on the small fence we'd built around it. No, of course there was never a baby. Do you think I'm stupid enough to get pregnant right now? I've got too much work to do first. But the old fool bought it completely. He's been bringing me soup and asking how I'm feeling. Laughter drifted through the window, cold and sharp. The best part is now he feels guilty, like his mean behavior somehow caused me to miscarry. He's so desperate to make it up to me. He'll do anything I ask. Yesterday, he helped me plant a memorial tree for the baby that never existed. I almost couldn't keep a straight face. The blood drained from my face as the full scope of her deception became clear. Owen doesn't know. Obviously, he thinks it was real, too. Poor thing was so upset when I told him I was bleeding, he actually cried. But it's better this way. Now they both feel sorry for me. And I can use that. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking with rage. The memorial tree we'd planted, the tears she'd cried, the grief that had made me want to comfort her. All of it fake. All of it carefully orchestrated to manipulate me back into line. As I walked back to my truck, I could still hear her voice floating through the window. Trust me, by Christmas, he'll be writing us a check for the full amount. Guilt is a powerful motivator, and once I have that money, we can finally start living the life we deserve. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at their perfect house, with its perfect lawn and perfect facade. Everything about Skylar was carefully constructed, from her tears to her apologies to her newfound devotion to family. But she'd made one crucial mistake in her performance. She thought I was a fool who could be manipulated by fake tears and manufactured tragedies. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Skylar's laughter echoing in my head. The fake tears, the manufactured grief, the memorial tree we'd planted for a baby that never existed. It all played on repeat like a horror movie I couldn't turn off. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to have a dramatic showdown or demand explanations. Instead, I was going to do something much more dangerous. I was going to let them think their plan was working. 2 days later, I called Owen. "Dad, is everything okay?" "You sound tired. I haven't been sleeping well," I admitted. "I keep thinking about the baby, about what we lost." There was a pause on the other end. "Dad, you can't blame yourself for what happened, can't I?" "Owen, I was so angry after the wedding, so stubborn. Maybe if I'd been more understanding, more supportive, things would have been different." "Dad, I want to make things right," I interrupted with both of you. "Life's too short to hold grudges, and we've all learned that the hard way." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time to put the past behind us completely, to move forward as a real family." The relief in his voice was obvious. That's great, Dad. Skylar will be so happy to hear this. She's still struggling with guilt about everything. Well, tell her she doesn't need to feel guilty anymore. We're family and family stick together." That weekend, I showed up at their house with a bottle of expensive wine and a smile. Skylar greeted me with a hug that lasted just a little too long, her performance as the grateful daughter-in-law in full swing. "Frank, Owen told me what you said about wanting to move forward. I can't tell you how much that means to me." "We've all made mistakes," I said, handing her the wine. "The important thing is learning from them." Over dinner, I played my part perfectly. I asked Skylar about her recovery, expressed concern about her emotional well-being, and even brought up the memorial tree. "I was thinking we might want to plant some flowers around it," I suggested. "Something that blooms in spring, a symbol of new life." Skylar's eyes welled up with perfectly timed tears. "That's beautiful, Frank. I think she would have liked that." Skylar had decided the imaginary baby was a girl. "Have you thought about names?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Alice," she said without hesitation. "We were going to call her Alice May." Owen reached over and squeezed her hand. "After your grandmother," he said softly. I nodded approvingly, filing away this new detail in the elaborate fiction they were constructing. As the evening progressed, I made sure to drop subtle hints about my financial situation. I mentioned having to meet with my financial advisor about year-end tax planning. I talked about the stock market performance and how my investments were doing better than expected. I even joked about having more money than I knew what to do with in retirement. Skylar hung on every word, her eyes bright with interest whenever the conversation turned to finances. "You know," she said as we were having dessert, "Owen and I were just talking about wanting to buy a bigger house. Maybe start looking at places where we could eventually have children again when we're ready. But the market is so expensive right now." "Real estate is always a good investment," I agreed. "Eleanor and I bought our house for $12,000 in 1982. Today, it's worth almost 10 times that." $12,000, Skylar gasped. "That's incredible. You must feel so smart about that decision. Sometimes the best investments are the ones you don't think about. You just do what feels right and trust that it will work out." The message was received. I could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating how much she could extract from the guilt-ridden old man who blamed himself for her fake miscarriage. Over the next few weeks, I maintained the charade perfectly. I called regularly to check on Skylar's emotional state. I brought meals when she claimed to be having bad days. I even suggested she might want to talk to a grief counselor, which she declined with just the right amount of brave martyrdom. "I'm dealing with it in my own way," she said. "Having family support means everything. Knowing that you've forgiven me, that you don't blame me for what happened, that's the best medicine I could ask for." But while I was playing the role of the reformed and guilty father-in-law, I was also conducting my own investigation. I'd learned a long time ago that knowledge is power, and I wanted to know exactly who I was dealing with. I hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Hayes, who specialized in family matters. I told her I was concerned about my son's marriage and wanted to know more about his wife's background. "Just the basics," I said. "Financial history, employment record, maybe talk to some people who knew her before she married my son." Carla was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she had a comprehensive report on Skylar Ashford, now Skylar Peterson. The picture that emerged wasn't pretty. Skylar had been married once before to a man named Eric Shaw, who owned a successful restaurant chain. The marriage had lasted exactly 18 months and had ended when Eric discovered that Skylar had been systematically draining his business accounts to fund her shopping habits. She'd walked away with a significant settlement rather than face potential criminal charges. Before that, she'd been engaged to James Fuller, no relation despite sharing the last name. James was heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, but he'd broken off the engagement when his family's private investigator uncovered evidence that Skylar was planning to claim common-law marriage rights to his estate. There were other men, too, a pattern of targeting wealthy partners and extracting as much money as possible before moving on to the next victim. She was good at it, good enough that none of her previous targets had pressed charges. They'd all been too embarrassed or too eager to get rid of her to pursue legal action. The most interesting discovery was that Skylar had never actually graduated from the prestigious university she claimed on her resume. She'd attended for 1 semester before dropping out, but had been using the connection ever since to network with wealthy alumni. Carla's report also included financial records that showed Skylar was deeply in debt despite her appearances of wealth, credit cards maxed out, loans from multiple sources, and a lifestyle that was funded entirely by Owen's income and credit. "Your son is supporting her entire existence," Carla told me when she delivered the report. "And from what I can tell, she's been planning this marriage as her retirement fund from day one." But the most damaging information came from Carla's interviews with people who'd known Skylar before she met Owen. "I talked to 3 of her former roommates and 2 ex-co-workers," Carla said. "They all described the same pattern. Skylar would target men with money, create elaborate emotional manipulation scenarios, and extract as much cash as possible before moving on. One woman told me Skylar actually kept a notebook rating potential targets based on their net worth and emotional vulnerability. A notebook just like the one she was probably keeping on me. "There's something else," Carla continued. "One of her former roommates mentioned that Skylar had faked a pregnancy before. Different guy, same playbook. She used it to get him to pay for an expensive baby moon vacation, then claimed she miscarried while they were in Europe. He felt so guilty he bought her a car as a consolation gift. My hands tightened around the report as I read through Carla's detailed findings. Everything was documented, verified, cross-referenced. Skylar wasn't just a gold digger. She was a professional con artist who had turned emotional manipulation into a career. And my son had no idea. The question now was what to do with this information. I could confront Owen directly, show him the evidence of what his wife really was. But I knew my son well enough to know he wouldn't believe it. Love makes people blind to uncomfortable truths. And Owen was deeply in love with the woman Skylar pretended to be. No, if I wanted to protect my son, I had to be smarter than that. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Carla's report spread across the table, planning my next move. Skylar thought she was playing me, using my guilt and grief to set up her biggest score yet. But she'd made a crucial error in her calculations. She thought I was just another Mark, another lonely old man, desperate for family connection and vulnerable to emotional manipulation. She had no idea that I'd spent 40 years building a business by reading people, by understanding their motivations, by staying 3 steps ahead of anyone who tried to cheat me. And she certainly had no idea that every conversation we'd had since the fake miscarriage had been recorded. Living alone in a big house, you worry about security. That's why I'd installed a comprehensive system with cameras and audio recording throughout the property. Every time Skylar and Owen visited, every phone conversation I'd had with them, every detail of their elaborate con game, all of it was preserved in digital clarity, but I wasn't ready to play that card yet. First, I wanted to see how far she was willing to go. The next phase of her plan revealed itself the following week when Owen called with exciting news. "Dad, you'll never guess what happened. Skylar got offered an amazing opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "There's this charity organization, Children's Medical Research Foundation, and they want her to be their new development director. It's a dream job for her, using her organizational skills for something meaningful." "That sounds wonderful. The only thing is they need someone who can make a significant personal donation to show their commitment to the cause. It's standard practice in the non-profit world," they said. "Kind of like putting skin in the game." Of course it was. "How much are we talking about?" "Well, that's the thing. It needs to be substantial enough to demonstrate serious commitment. They suggested somewhere in the range of $250,000. Music. I let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of money, Owen." I know. And normally, we'd never even consider asking. But with Skylar still recovering from the miscarriage, she really needs something positive to focus on. This job could be exactly what she needs to heal. The manipulation was flawless. They weren't asking for money for themselves. They were asking for money to help Skylar recover from the trauma I had supposedly caused. Money that would go to help sick children, no less. How could I possibly refuse? "And honestly, Dad," Owen continued, "we thought maybe this could be your gift to Alice, a way to honor her memory by helping other children." Alice. The imaginary baby had now become the emotional leverage for a $250,000 con. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course, take all the time you need, but they do need an answer fairly soon. The position starts next month." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and laughed until my sides hurt. The audacity of it was almost admirable. They'd created an entire fictional charity job as a cover for stealing my money, complete with emotional manipulation and dead baby guilt. But they'd also given me exactly what I needed to destroy them. I called Carla Hayes. I need you to do some research on the Children's Medical Research Foundation. I told her, I'm particularly interested in whether they actually exist, whether they're offering anyone a development director position, and whether they require new employees to make personal donations. Carla called back 3 hours later. There is a Children's Medical Research Foundation. She said it's a legitimate charity based in Atlanta, but they're not hiring. They don't have a development director positions available, and they certainly don't require employees to make personal donations. That would be completely unethical and probably illegal. So if someone was claiming to have a job offer from them, they'd be lying, probably planning to set up a fake account to receive the donation money. I thanked Carla and hung up. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Leonard Weiss, who'd been handling my affairs for 20 years. Leonard, I need to make some changes to my will. I said, significant changes, and I need them done quickly and quietly. What kind of changes? I'm removing Owen as my primary beneficiary. I want everything to go to charity instead, the real Children's Medical Research Foundation, as a matter of fact. And I want to set up a small trust for Daniel Scott. Daniel was the young man who'd been working at my garage for the past 5 years, first as an apprentice, and now as the manager of my old shop. He was the son I'd never had, loyal and honest and hard-working. If anyone deserved to benefit from my life's work, it was him. Frank, are you sure about this? That's a major decision. Maybe we should discuss. I'm completely sure, Leonard, and I want it done by the end of the week. The second call was to Daniel. Daniel, it's Frank. Do you have a few minutes to talk? There's something I need to discuss with you. As I explained the situation to Daniel, I could hear the shock in his voice. Mr. Peterson, I don't know what to say. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You've been like a son to me these past few years. You've earned this. But what about Owen? He's your real son. Owen made his choice when he chose money over family. You chose loyalty and respect. That's worth more than blood. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of Eleanor's favorite wine and sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow, I would start the final phase of my plan. Skylar thought she was playing the long game, slowly manipulating me toward a massive payday, but she had no idea that the game was already over. She'd just lost everything, and she didn't even know it yet. The meeting with my lawyer was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 a.m. Leonard Weiss had been handling my legal affairs since Eleanor and I bought our first house, and he'd never questioned my decisions before. But as I sat across from his mahogany desk, watching him review the new will documents, I could see the concern in his weathered face. Frank, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain about this? Disinheriting your only son is a decision that can't be undone after you're gone. Leonard, in 40 years of knowing me, have I ever made a rash decision? He sighed and shook his head. No, you haven't. But this feels different, personal. It is personal. Owen chose his wife over his father. Now he gets to live with that choice. Leonard reviewed the documents one final time, then slid them across the desk for my signature. The new will leaves your entire estate to the Children's Medical Research Foundation in Atlanta, with the exception of a $50,000 trust for Daniel Scott. All previous wills are hereby null and void. I signed my name with steady hands, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders with each stroke of the pen. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a sealed envelope. "I want you to hold on to this. Don't open it unless something happens to me, and don't give it to anyone except Daniel Scott. It contains some recordings and documents that explain my reasons for these changes." Leonard took the envelope and locked it in his safe. "Frank, I hope you know what you're doing. For the first time in months, I know exactly what I'm doing." That afternoon, I called Owen to give him my answer about Skylar's supposed job opportunity. "Dad, I'm so glad you called. Skylar's been anxiously waiting to hear from you. This opportunity means so much to her." "Well, you can tell her I've been thinking about it, and I've decided I want to help." The excitement in Owen's voice was genuine. "Really, Dad? That's incredible. She's going to cry when I tell her. I'm sure she will. But Owen, I need to be smart about this. It's a lot of money, and I want to make sure it's handled properly. Of course, whatever you need, I'll need to see some documentation from the charity, official letterhead, contact information, details about the position, and I'll want to speak with someone from their board of directors before I write any checks." There was a pause on the other end. Sure. I'll have Skylar get all that information together for you." "Good. And, Owen, I don't want Skylar to know I'm doing this until everything is finalized. I want it to be a surprise." "Dad, she's going to be so grateful. This could really turn her life around after everything she's been through." "I certainly hope so." Over the next week, I watched them scramble to create fake documentation for the non-existent job. Skylar called me twice, her voice carefully modulated to sound hopeful, but not pushy. "Frank, I just wanted to thank you for considering helping me with this opportunity. I know it's a lot to ask, Skylar. You're family. Family helps family. That means everything to me. I promise I won't let you down." "I know you won't, sweetheart." The fake documents arrived by email 3 days later. Whoever had created them had done a decent job. Official-looking letterhead, professional language. Even a fake signature from someone claiming to be the Foundation's director. If I hadn't already known it was a scam, I might have been fooled. But the real masterpiece was the fake phone number they provided. When I called it, a woman answered with a professional greeting. "Children's Medical Research Foundation. How may I help you?" I asked to speak with the director about a potential donation, and she connected me to someone claiming to be Dr. Patricia Williams, the Foundation's president. The voice was clearly Skylar attempting a slightly different accent, but she played the role convincingly. "Mr. Peterson, I understand you're interested in supporting our new development director position. We're so excited about having Skylar join our team. She speaks very highly of your organization." I said, "Well, she's exactly what we need. Someone with her background and connections could really help us expand our fundraising efforts." We talked for 15 minutes about the Foundation's supposed work, Skylar's qualifications, and the donation requirement. She even had prepared answers for specific questions about the charity's programs and financial structure. It was an impressive performance, even if it was completely fraudulent. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and marveled at the elaborate deception they'd constructed. They'd created fake documents, set up a fake phone number, and rehearsed an entire fake conversation. The amount of effort they'd put into stealing my money was almost admirable. But they'd made one critical error. They assumed I was too trusting, too naive, too desperate for family connection to verify their story independently. They had no idea I'd already confirmed that the Real Children's Medical Research Foundation knew nothing about any of this. That evening, Owen called to follow up. "Dad, did you get a chance to look at the documents Skylar sent?" I did. Very impressive organization. I even spoke with Dr. Williams on the phone. "You did? That's great. What did you think?" She seemed very knowledgeable, very passionate about the work they're doing. "So does that mean?" "It means I'm willing to move forward, but I want to do this right, Owen. A donation of this size needs to be handled through my financial advisor and lawyer. Tax implications, paperwork, all of that. Of course, whatever you think is best. I'll need about a week to get everything organized. Can Skylar wait that long?" "Absolutely, Dad. I can't tell you how much this means to both of us, especially after everything that's happened. Well, it's time we put the past behind us and focus on the future." The week that followed was busy. I met with my financial advisor to liquidate some investments, not to fund Skylar's scam, but to clean up my portfolio before the will changes took effect. I also spent time with Daniel, gradually preparing him for the responsibility he'd be inheriting. "I still don't understand why you're doing all this," Daniel said, as we sat in the office of what used to be my auto shop. "Owen is your son. Owen is my biological son," I corrected. "But biology doesn't make someone family. Loyalty does, respect does, love does. You've shown me all of those things, Daniel. Owen has shown me none. But what if he changes? What if he realizes what his wife is really like? Then he'll have learned a valuable lesson. But it won't change my decision. I'm too old to wait around hoping my son will grow a backbone." On Thursday afternoon, I called Owen with an update. "Everything's almost ready," I told him. "I should be able to write the check by early next week." "That's fantastic, Dad. Skylar's been so excited she can barely sleep. She keeps talking about all the good they'll be able to do with the money." "I'm sure they will. Actually, Dad, she was wondering if maybe we could all have dinner this weekend to celebrate. Just a quiet family meal to mark this new beginning." "That sounds perfect. Why don't you come here? I'll cook. Are you sure? We could go out somewhere nice." "No, I want to cook for my family. It's been too long since I've had people to cook for." Saturday evening arrived grey and cold, with the first hints of winter in the air. I spent the afternoon preparing Eleanor's famous pot roast recipe, the one that had been Owen's favorite when he was growing up. The house filled with the rich aroma of beef and vegetables, bringing back memories of family dinners when we were actually a family. Owen and Skylar arrived at 6 car sharp. Skylar had clearly put effort into her appearance, wearing a simple but elegant dress and just enough makeup to look naturally beautiful. She hugged me tightly when she arrived, holding on just a beat longer than necessary. "Frank, the house smells incredible, just like I remember from when Owen was little." She'd never been in my house when Owen was little, but I appreciated the effort. "It's Eleanor's recipe," I said. "She always said the secret was patience. Good things take time." Skylar's eyes misted over. I wish I could have known her better. "Owen has told me so many wonderful stories about her. She would have loved you," I lied smoothly. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Skylar was animated and charming, full of plans for her new position and gratitude for my support. Owen looked happier than I'd seen him in months, clearly thrilled that his wife and father were finally getting along. "I've been thinking," Skylar said as I served dessert, "about ways to honor Alice's memory through this new job. Maybe we could establish a special fund in her name, specifically for premature babies who don't make it." The audacity was breathtaking. She was now planning to use her fake dead baby as the name for a fund built on stolen money. "That's a beautiful idea," I said. "I'm sure Alice would be proud. I like to think she's watching over us," Skylar said softly. "Bringing our family together, making sure something good comes from something so painful." Owen reached over and squeezed her hand. "Dad, I need you to know how much it means to me, that you're doing this for her, for us." "Family takes care of family," I said. "That's what Eleanor always believed." After dinner, we moved to the living room with coffee and brandy. The conversation turned to future plans, holidays we'd spend together, grandchildren they hope to have someday. Real grandchildren this time, Skylar assured me, with just the right amount of wistful sadness. "You know," I said, settling into Eleanor's old chair, "this whole experience has taught me something important about family, about what really matters." "What's that?" Owen asked. "That blood isn't everything. What matters is trust, honesty, being there for each other when it counts," Skylar nodded earnestly. I couldn't agree more. That's why what happened at the wedding was so terrible. I violated that trust, that honesty. But I promise you, Frank, that will never happen again. "I believe you," I said, and I could see the relief flood her face. "So, when do you think you'll be able to finalize the donation?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Actually, I was thinking we could take care of it Monday morning. I'll have my lawyer prepare the paperwork over the weekend, and we can meet at his office to make it official." Skylar's eyes lit up. "Really? That soon?" "No point in waiting. When you've made a decision, you follow through." They left shortly after 9, both of them glowing with anticipation. Skylar hugged me goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection, though I knew it was just another performance. "Thank you," she whispered in my ear, "for giving me a second chance, for believing in me." "Thank you for making Owen so happy," I replied. After they drove away, I sat in my quiet house and thought about the conversation we just had, about family, trust, and honesty, about being there for each other when it counts. On Monday morning, they were going to learn what all of those words actually meant. I pulled out my phone and sent a text message to Daniel. Everything ready for Monday. "Meet me at Leonard's office at 10 a.m. Bring the documentation we discussed," his reply came immediately. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Peterson? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sunday night I couldn't sleep, not because I was having second thoughts, but because I was finally, after months of manipulation and lies, about to show them exactly who they were dealing with. They thought they'd found the perfect mark. A lonely old man desperate for family connection, easily manipulated by fake tears and manufactured tragedies. They thought they were so clever, so smooth, so far ahead of the naive mechanic, who couldn't possibly understand their sophisticated con game. Tomorrow they would learn that the naive mechanic had been playing his own game all along. And unlike theirs, mine was about to have a winner. Monday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp December day that makes everything look sharp and clean. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the same navy one I'd worn to the wedding that had started this whole mess. This time, though, I wasn't going somewhere as an unwanted guest. I was going somewhere as a man in complete control. Leonard Weiss's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown building that had been there since the 1920s. The waiting room still had the original hardwood floors and tall windows that let in streams of morning light. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in one of the leather chairs, watching the city wake up below me. Daniel arrived at 10 minutes before 10, unhonxed, looking nervous in his only good suit. He'd been like a son to me for 5 years, and today he was about to discover just how much that meant. "Mr. Peterson, I still think maybe we should reconsider this. Maybe talk to Owen first. Give him a chance to Daniel," I interrupted gently. "I've given Owen 38 years of chances. Some people don't change until they face real consequences." Leonard appeared in the doorway of his office. "Frank, Daniel, please come in. I have everything prepared." Owen and Skylar were already seated at the conference table, both dressed like they were attending a graduation ceremony. Skylar wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Daniel made in a week, and her smile could have powered the building. "Dad." Owen stood up and hugged me. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. Skylar barely slept last night." "I'm just so grateful," Skylar said, standing to kiss my cheek. "This is going to change everything." "I certainly hope so," I replied. Leonard gestured for everyone to take their seats. "Before we begin, I want to make sure everyone understands what we're here to accomplish today. Mr. Peterson has asked me to prepare documentation for a charitable donation to the Children's Medical Research Foundation." "That's right," Skylar said eagerly, "for my new position as development director." Leonard nodded and opened a thick folder. "Yes, I've been in contact with the foundation to coordinate this gift." He looked up at Skylar with a neutral expression. "Interesting organization. They were quite surprised to hear from me." A flicker of something crossed Skylar's face, but she recovered quickly. "Surprised? Well, they seemed confused about a few details, particularly regarding your employment with them." The room went very quiet. Owen looked confused, glancing between his wife and the lawyer. "I spoke with Dr. Patricia Williams, their president," Leonard continued conversationally. "Lovely woman. She was very curious to know who had been using her name and the foundation's reputation for unauthorized purposes." Skylar's face went pale. "I think there might be some misunderstanding." "Oh, I think you're right about that," Leonard agreed. "Someone definitely misunderstood something." He turned to a fresh page in his folder. "The Real Children's Medical Research Foundation has never heard of you, Miss Peterson. They're not hiring a development director. They don't require employees to make personal donations, and they certainly didn't authorize anyone to solicit money on their behalf." Owen stared at his wife, his mouth slightly open. "Skylar, what is he talking about?" "Owen, I can explain. Actually, I interjected, pulling out my own folder. I think I can explain better. I set the private investigator's report on the table along with printed transcripts of the recorded conversations I'd captured over the past few weeks. Eric Shaw, I read from the first page. Married to Skylar Ashford for 18 months. Marriage ended when he discovered she'd been stealing from his business accounts. Sound familiar, Owen? Owen picked up the report with trembling hands. What is this? That's a comprehensive background check on your wife. Very interesting reading. Did you know she was married before? That's not. Owen looked at Skylar desperately. You said you'd never been married. Skylar stood up abruptly. This is all lies. Someone's trying to sabotage me. James Fuller, I continued reading, engaged to Skylar for 6 months, before his family discovered she was planning to make false common law marriage claims against his estate. Dad, stop, Owen said weakly. Oh, we're just getting started. I flipped to the next section. Here's my favorite part. The fake pregnancy with Jonathan Mills. Sound familiar? She used the same playbook on him that she used on us. Fake pregnancy, fake miscarriage, guilt-induced payoff. The color had completely drained from Owen's face. He looked at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Skylar. His voice was barely a whisper. She sat back down, her performance finally cracking. Owen, you have to understand. I was different then, young and stupid. I've changed, have you? I asked. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on an audio file. Skylar's voice filled the room crystal clear. I know, but you should see how pathetic he is now. All that anger just melted away the second he thought I lost a baby. Men are so predictable. Owen dropped the report like it was on fire. Oh my God. No. Of course there was never a baby. Do you think I'm stupid enough to get pregnant right now? I've got too much work to do first, but the old fool bought it completely. Skylar lunged for my phone, but Daniel was faster, standing up to block her path. That's enough, she said, her sweet voice replaced by something cold and sharp. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. Leonard opened another folder. The phone number you provided for the fake charity. It was traced to a prepaid cell phone, registered under a false name. The fake documents you created, they contained several factual errors about the real foundation that only someone pretending to be affiliated with them would make. Owen was staring at his wife like she'd grown a second head. Skylar, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't fake a pregnancy. Tell me you didn't lie about losing our baby. For a moment, Skylar's mask slipped completely. The sweet, vulnerable woman disappeared, replaced by someone Owen had never seen before. What did you expect? Yishi snapped. You think I married you for your sparkling personality. Your family has money, Owen. Real money. I've worked too hard to let some sentimental old fool ruin everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Owen looked like he'd been physically struck. The memorial tree, he said quietly. We planted a tree for a baby that never existed. Oh, please, it's just a tree. That's when something in Owen finally broke. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Get out, he said, his voice barely controlled. Owen, don't be ridiculous. We can work this out. Get out! The shout echoed through the office. Skylar looked around the room, finally realizing that her game was over. Her eyes landed on me, filled with pure hatred. This is all your fault, she hissed. You couldn't just write the check and stay out of the way. No, I said calmly. I couldn't. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. then turned back for one final shot. "You think you've won something, Frank? You just destroyed your own son's happiness. He'll never forgive you for this." "Maybe not," I agreed, "but at least he'll be free." After she left, the office fell into an uncomfortable silence. Owen sat slumped in his chair, staring at the papers scattered across the table. The evidence of his wife's deception, the proof that his marriage had been built on lies from the very beginning. "Dad," he said finally, his voice. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are, son. How long have you known?" "I suspected from the beginning. I knew for certain after the fake miscarriage." Owen buried his face in his hands. "I chose her over you at the wedding. When she humiliated you, I said nothing. I chose her." "Yes, you did. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in months. He looked younger without Skylar's influence, more like the boy I'd raised. But he also looked older, aged by the weight of what he'd learned about himself and the choices he'd made. "Owen, forgiveness is earned, not given. You have a lot of work to do." He nodded slowly. "What happens now?" Leonard cleared his throat diplomatically. "If I may, there are some legal matters we should discuss. The attempted fraud, the fake charity solicitation." "No charges," I said firmly. "Let her disappear. She's not worth the trouble." "And the money?" Owen asked. "The donation you were going to make." I smiled. "Oh, I'm still making a donation to the Children's Medical Research Foundation, a substantial one, in memory of all the real children who actually need help." Leonard pulled out the final set of documents. "Which brings us to the other matter we need to discuss today." Owen looked confused. "Other matter?" "Daniel," I said, "I think you should know that as of this morning, you're a wealthy man." Daniel nearly fell out of his chair. "Mr. Peterson, what are you talking about?" Leonard placed a document in front of Daniel. "Mr. Peterson has established a trust in your name. $50,000 to be used for your education or to expand the auto repair business. But I don't understand. The rest of my estate," I continued, "everything I've built over 40 years, is going to charity. Real charity, where it can do some actual good." Owen went very still. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I changed my will, son, last week. Everything goes to legitimate organizations that help people who actually need it. You disinherited me. You disinherited yourself when you chose money over family. When you let your wife treat me like garbage and said nothing. When you participated in her scheme to steal from me." Owen started to cry. Then not the controlled tears of a man trying to maintain his dignity, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. "Dad, please. I know I messed up, but I can change. We can start over. Can we, Owen? For months, you've been part of a plan to defraud me. You helped your wife fake a pregnancy, fake a miscarriage, fake a job opportunity. You sat there while she manipulated my grief and guilt, even now. Are you sorry because you realized what she did to me? Or are you sorry because you found out there's no money in it for you?" He couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I stood up and put my hand on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel's the son I should have had all along, loyal, honest, hard-working. He never asked me for anything, never tried to manipulate me, never made me feel like I didn't belong in my own family. "But he's not your blood," Owen protested weakly. "No, he's not. But he's family in every way that actually matters. I walked to the window and looked out over the city where I'd spent my entire adult life building something meaningful, something that would outlast me and maybe make the world a little bit better. "You know what the funny part is," I said, not turning around. "If you'd just defended me at that wedding, if you'd told your wife that treating me with disrespect wasn't acceptable, none of this would have happened. I would have given you that check and been happy to do it, Dad. But you didn't. You chose her over me. Money over family. Appearances over loyalty. So now you get to live with those choices." I turned back to the room. Owen was still crying. Daniel looked overwhelmed, and Leonard was carefully organizing papers with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen too many families destroy themselves over money. "The divorce papers will be ready by Thursday," Leonard told Owen. "Given the circumstances, it should be fairly straightforward." "I don't even know where to start," Owen said. "The house, the debts she ran up, the life we built." "You start by learning to stand on your own 2 feet, I said, like I did when I was 18, and had nothing. Like Daniel did when his father walked out on his family. Like every person does who decides to take responsibility for their own life, instead of looking for someone else to carry them." I gathered up my copies of the documents and put them in my briefcase. "Where are you going?" Owen asked. "Home. I have a life to live, and for the first time in months I can live it without worrying about who's trying to manipulate me." "What about us? What about our relationship?" I paused at the door. "Owen, if you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to earn it. The same way Daniel earned it, through respect and loyalty, and genuine affection, not because you're hoping for an inheritance. How do I do that? Figure it out. You're a grown man." 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch reading the newspaper when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I could see Owen getting out of a much older, more modest car than the BMWs he used to drive. He walked up to the porch slowly, like a man approaching a job interview. Knew he wasn't sure he'd get. "Hi, Dad." "Owen, I was wondering if maybe I could talk to you about what? About taking responsibility for what I did. About earning your respect back, if that's possible." I folded my newspaper and really looked at him. He'd lost weight, and not in a good way. His clothes were clean, but well worn. His hair needed cutting, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "What happened to the house?" I asked. "Foreclosed. Turns out Skylar had run up more debt than I knew about. Credit cards, personal loans, all in my name." "Where are you living?" "Apartment across town, 1 bedroom, but it's clean and quiet. I'm working for Mark Jensen's construction now. Manual labor, but it's honest work. Mark Jensen's construction. I knew Mark had done some work on his trucks over the years. Good man, fair employer, but he didn't pay much. How long have you been there?" 4 months, Mark says. If I keep working hard, he might make me a crew leader next year." I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the entitled, manipulated man he'd been 6 months ago. What I saw instead was someone who looked genuinely humbled, genuinely changed. "Why are you here, Owen?" "Because I want to apologize. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserve an apology. A real one." "I'm listening." He sat down on the porch steps, not in the chair next to me, keeping his distance. "I was weak, dead. Skylar made me feel important, successful, like I was better than I actually was. And when she looked down on other people, including you, it made me feel superior too. Go on. At the wedding, when she called you a filthy mechanic, part of me was embarrassed. Not of her behavior, but of you, of where I came from. I thought I'd move beyond all that, become something better. The honesty in his voice was painful to hear, but I was wrong. You built everything you have with your hands in your heart. You earned every dollar, every bit of respect, every friendship. You never had to lie or manipulate or pretend to be something you weren't. And what about you? I don't know who I am yet without someone else telling me, but I'm trying to figure it out. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the birds and the distant sound of kids playing in the neighborhood. Are you happy? I asked finally. He thought about it for a long moment. I'm not happy yet, but I'm not miserable either. For the first time in years, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. That's something. It's a start. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. But if there's any chance, any possibility, that someday we could have a relationship again, I'd like to try. I looked at this man who was my son, who'd made terrible choices but seemed genuinely committed to making better ones, who'd lost everything but appeared to be finding himself in the process. Owen, I'm not changing my will. What's done is done. I understand, and I'm not going to pretend that what happened didn't happen. Trust takes time to rebuild. I know. But if you're serious about earning back my respect, if you're willing to do the work without any guarantee of reward, then maybe we can start with coffee once a month. See how it goes. His face lit up with something I hadn't seen in years, genuine joy that had nothing to do with money or material gain. I'd like that, Dad. I'd like that a lot. Next Sunday, 10 Quorn. Denny's on 5th Street. I'll be there. After he drove away, I sat on my porch until the sun went down, thinking about second chances and the difference between earning something and expecting it. Daniel called that evening to tell me about his plans for expanding the shop, about the business courses he was taking at the community college, about the young woman he'd been dating, who made him laugh. Owen called to confirm our coffee date and to thank me for giving him a chance he knew he didn't deserve. And for the first time since Eleanor died, I went to sleep feeling like I had a family again. Not the family I was born with, or the one I'd tried to hold together, through obligation and guilt, but the one I'd chosen, the one that chose me back. The envelope with the $500,000 check still sat in my desk drawer, never cashed, now worthless. But it had served its purpose. It had shown me exactly who the people in my life really were, and sometimes that knowledge is worth more than all the money in the world. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are Minister of Revenge favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.